Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ADAO's 17th International Asbestos Awareness and Prevention Conference. We are so delighted that you're joining us online, and we have an amazing program for you. We have experts here at Emory University and some experts online. We're going to bring you the latest and greatest information that you can use to advance prevention and policy. For those of you who I haven't met before, ADAO began 18 years ago. We're an independent nonprofit. We don't make any legal referrals, and we're all about education, advocacy, and community. Our goal has always remained true and constant. We want to prevent exposure to eliminate all asbestos-caused diseases. So it's time to get social. For those of you who have 1, 2, or 3 phones, go ahead, throw out a fact, a stat, a photo, a comment, and make sure you use the tag that we are using today, which is 2022 ADAO in your tweets and your Facebook posts. We'd love to have your social media support. It wouldn't be a conference if we didn't remember Doug Larkin, ADAO co-founder. Doug and I met in Senator Patty Murray's office back in 2003. It was there that Doug and I voiced our loneliness, our anger, and our willingness to want to reduce the pain that our families were suffering from when Alan was diagnosed and his father-in-law, Bill. You're going to learn more about Bill from his children later this morning. So we miss you, Doug. So our first conference was 2005, and it was fabulous. In this photograph on the top left, you're actually going to see some of our speakers that are here today, like Dr. Castleman, Dr. Lemon. You can see Doug peeking out over there, my late husband on the left, and of course Emily is a small child down on her knees on the floor. So we started a long time ago, and we continue to grow. And I really believe that we are one. We have 8 countries coming together. And let me tell you, it's not always easy, but we get it done, and we use unity and collaboration as one of our strongest assets. Yesterday, we did an amazing program about art, advocacy, and action. We brought together filmmakers, photographers, authors, even a political cartoonist to bring you a way that ADAO tells our shared story in different mediums. You'll be able to watch this online by next Friday. Now, Jordan Zevon's our national spokesperson. You'll hear more from him later on during the awards, but we always want to thank Jordan. Online, where you're viewing this conference now, you'll see our 117-page program. You'll find the agenda, speaker bios. You'll see personally written tributes for our honorees, tributes from warriors and our sponsors. So get familiar with that program as you're watching our conference. We had an amazing lecture yesterday. Our colleague David Borax from WFAE, NPR affiliate, gave a presentation that was just so outstanding. We recorded it, and you have the benefit of watching it today and learn all about Davidson, North Carolina. And David will tell this amazing story about his investigative journalist and what's happening now. And lessons learned. We'll also have some Q&A. We couldn't do this without dollars. You all know that. For those who donate as individuals and those sponsors, we want to say thank you. You give to us because you believe in our work. We don't give anything back other than our sincere gratitude. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Simmons Hanley Conroy firm, who are a platinum sponsor. Our gold sponsor is the Gorey Law Firm, and we have 2 silver sponsors, Bailey Glasser and Early Lucarelli, Sweeney, and Meisenkoten. And to our sponsors and individual donors, we say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It's an amazing program. We don't hire out, we do it in-house. And that means sometimes you have to wait for presenters or might have a couple glitches, but we bring you the best content that we can at the budget that we have, and we're not making any compromises or apologies about that. We want to use our money where the dollars can be well spent. Meet our board of directors and ADAO leadership. You have this in your program, and you can read through to meet more of our team. Ellen, who is sitting at a table here now, is worked This is about the 10th conference Ellen has worked on. She is my right-hand soul sister on this. So from the bottom of our hearts, Ellen, thank you for all you do to make this conference possible. Yes, we have smart people, and you know what? We tell the truth. We always do, we always will, and we have the best experts in this room and online ready to bring you their presentations. I want to thank in advance our co-chairs, Dr. Frank and Dr. Lemon, followed by the board members, Dr. Black, Dr. Castleman, Dr. Flores, Dr. Harbert, Dr. Morkowitz, Dr. Moline, and Christine Oliver. You do an amazing job and help to make our work possible. On the prevention side, which is equally as important, Brent Kynock leads our prevention board, followed by members including Mark Catlin, Claire Deacon, Tom Lobenthal, John Newquist, Tony Rich, and Mark Winter. And when we have technical questions, we make sure that we have the right answers that are fact-based. Tonight, during the awards ceremony, we get to honor 7 individuals who do extraordinary work. And you can see on this slide that we're going to be honoring Dr. McDermott and Dr. Wolf with the Irving Selikoff Award. The Alan Reinstein Award will go to Laura Baker and Ignacio Tijera. Vicky Franzanetti in Italy will get the Tribute of Hope Award. Rory O'Neill, one of our dearest colleagues, will get the Tribute of Unity Award. And you all should listen to his speech because this man just breathes unity in the most authentic way. And then lastly, we're going to recognize those ADAO EPA co-plaintiffs with a tribute to all those that stepped up and recognize that prevention is great, but we need to do something more. And with the help of Bob Sussman, who you'll hear from later this morning, we sued the EPA 3 times, and yes, we won. Conference speakers, thank you. Look at this list. It is the who's who of asbestos experts. It's amazing. So yesterday we did have the Art and Advocacy Action Festival. Today is our academic conference. Tonight is our award ceremony. And I want to thank the first person that registered for our conference. Robert Nolan, are you online? I bet you are. You haven't missed one of our conferences in almost 10 years. I don't think you're going to learn anything new, but for anybody that represents industry or is connected or thinks that they can have safe use, this is an opportunity to get out your Sharpie because there is no safe or controlled use. There is no safe or controlled use. Look forward to your questions, Robert. Yes, Earl Daughter did an amazing presentation yesterday. We drove 300 miles all around Louisiana. We wanted to do the research. Who's around these 3 companies with the plants that are using asbestos diaphragms, the chlor-alkali plants. So Earl's poster, which is off to my left here, represents the 7th poster. Yes, there'll be an opportunity for you to buy and frame them in your office. As Fernanda knows, the labor prosecutor actually has her posters in her office, which makes me quite proud to know that those fighting for justice recognize the work that we do in the United States. Isn't it great, Dr. Moline? You got to smile at this, right? We're changing the playbook. Okay, so getting down to the end, we have most of them are going to be well received. But as we talk about our new playbook, we're done. We're done. If you want to import and use asbestos, if you want to ask the EPA for an exemption, if you want to mislead and use disinformation to say it's safe and controlled, we're going to let you know that you're wrong, and we're going to do it publicly. And this is going to be our most diplomatic slide that talks about President Biden's moonshot, and we know that we can prevent these cancers. So we're excited about the opportunity to share our new political cartoons that we actually draft them, and they work with amazing artists, John and Thimba, and there were 3 continents coming together. So you'll see them later on. It is about our shared stories. Look at this heart that was on the screen. Ellen and I went through nearly 300 memorials to come up with the slides that you'll see during the candlelighting, which will also be replayed. There's a lot of pain out there, and nothing makes it right or whole for us, except for the fact that maybe we can make someone else's life better by preventing exposure. So special thanks to Blue Heron, and we're grateful, and it is a wrap on that side. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Perry Browder to the podium to say a few words. and you have been the longest, most generous sponsor. You've come to all of these conferences, and I say thank you.
Well, Linda, thank you. We really do appreciate this privilege to be able to support ADAO and all of the work that you do. We want to thank everybody that's participating in this conference today, but we want to thank the viewers that are coming online because you're keeping this awareness going. We do this in memory of the people that we've lost, our friends, our families, our clients, but we do this so that it won't affect others in the future. This needs to end. We can do this. But with your support, with everybody online, and with the hard work that's happening here today, we can make that change so that future families, that future individuals will not get sick. On behalf of Simmons Hanley Conroy, all of its lawyers, its employees, and the clients we've represented, we thank everybody for the hard work that you're doing, the continued work that you do, and the results that you're getting. So we're looking forward to a great conference today. They're going to have great topics. Let's get started. Thank you, Linda.
I have the opportunity to bring Celeste up. She is going to be the moderator for session 1. You can stay there, absolutely. And Celeste, would you welcome our crowd? And we're going to queue up Mavis Nye from the UK.
It is my privilege to be here with an amazing group of people in the room and, of course, all of you who are online. We are starting with session number 1. The title is Progress and Challenges from the Front Line, and we're going to be joined by Mavis Nye from the UK.
It is a great honor to introduce our first speaker, Mavis Nye. You need no introduction, Mavis, so I'll just turn this precious time over to you for your remarks as our very first speaker at our 17th conference.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good evening for here. It's my privilege and pleasure on behalf of all the mesothelioma patients and carers around the world to welcome you to the ADAO's International Asbestos Awareness and Prevention Conference. You will hear from more than 40 experts from 7 countries, as always. My asbestos story started in 1960 when I married Ray and washed his clothes. He worked in the dockyard as a shipwright, and asbestos was all around, being installed or taken out of ships. There were no showers in those days. You just came straight home and bathed there, where I would then put the washing into the washing machine. All that dust didn't mean anything to us. We didn't know the dangers of this white dust that Ray had in his hair and in his boots. I've had so much treatment to gain shrinkage, and then it grows on trying to conquer my body again. Recently, the Lancet published malignant mesothelioma recognized as a new disease in the 1950s. It's almost exclusively caused by asbestos exposure and usually diagnosed decades after first exposure. The disease was initially restricted to asbestos workers, but diagnosis after non-occupational exposure continued to surge. Despite the knowledge by WHO and the International Agency for Research on Cancer more than 40 years ago that all forms of asbestos are carcinogenic, global asbestos use increased. These minerals are in our homes, commercial buildings, ships, vehicles, and thousands of products. When asbestos bans were introduced in Europe and Australia, their use surged in countries where traders suggested that chrysotile asbestos was safe. Despite mounting evidence of the danger, many countries have yet to recognise the urgency of the banning of asbestos and do not support WHO's aim of reducing or ending the incidence of asbestos-related cancers. Representatives of 10 countries, Russia, Kazakhstan, Syria, Venezuela, and more, are some of the countries that continue to block a 15-year-old UN motion to label chrysotile asbestos as especially hazardous. The global malignant mesothelioma epidemic shows no sign of abating. Oncologists should reinforce the idea that the continued harm caused by asbestos cannot be reduced without ceasing all asbestos mining and trade, increasing public awareness, enforcing regulations, and improving and diagnose treatment. Asbestos has silently caused a global epidemic. While both the HSE and the government have said they believe it should be removed, the committee said neither had put forward a clear and comprehensive strategy for achieving this. It wants all asbestos removed from non-domestic buildings within 40 years, starting with the highest risk settings such as schools, saying a clear deadline would help to focus minds. Simple reliance on a set of regulations which devolve asbestos management to individual duty holders, the building owners or managers responsible for the maintenance, will not be good enough, the committee said. We need a system-wide strategy for a long-term removal of asbestos, founded on strong evidence and what is best from a scientific and behavioural point of view. The government have been approached for comment, and the government have just turned down the option of 40 years to remove all asbestos from old buildings. They say it can be managed well. It's being proved when surveyed that this is not happening. We do not have a cure for mesothelioma, but it is a preventable cancer for future generations with the removal of asbestos from all buildings. The research is gaining more and more drugs that can shrink mesothelioma, but there still isn't a cure. But asbestos management and removal is a cure, and it is the only way we will beat this continuous death sentence that goes on and on each year around the world. I have an asbestos group on social media, and I get questions like, does this look like asbestos? I've just removed a fireplace. I've pulled down a shed. Does the corrugated roof contain asbestos? Can I remove asbestos myself? You must never handle or try to remove asbestos yourself. Asbestos becomes harmful once it has been disturbed, as this causes the fibres to be released, which they may then be inhaled. If you encounter what you suspect to be asbestos, you must not touch it. Instead, you should keep it isolated and seek specialist advice. Though, of course, a survey should always be carried out. I admire all the people involved in taking asbestos out of buildings, and we must see that they have PPE and protection, and most important, they need proper training. Everyone should have some training in asbestos and asbestos awareness. They must keep their lungs safe. Too many die each year around the world. They have banned Asbestos UK, but that isn't so to say that we are safe from its deadly hold on us. We have so many tons in old buildings. Our hospitals, schools, museums and colleges still have the deadly substance hidden in them. Asbestos has been banned in more than 60 countries, and yet asbestos exposure is the #1 cause of work-related deaths in the world. Approximately 90,000 people die from asbestos-related diseases globally each year. An estimated 125 million people worldwide remain at risk of occupational exposure to asbestos, and about 1.3 million US workers in construction and general industry are at risk of exposure today. When will we take charge and ban this material and make our world safer? I've just one last message to the mesothelioma warriors. Stay positive. I'm the longest living immunotherapy mesothelioma patient in the UK. I'm now in my 13th year since my diagnosis in 2009. We are beginning to survive mesothelioma, but we must ban throughout the world. Let's save the future's lungs. Thank you.
That was truly lovely and moving and necessary. I want to ask you a couple of quick questions, Mavis. When you washed Ray's clothes, as you shared, you and Ray didn't know that asbestos was harmful. In a few words, how would you tell the audience how this has impacted you and Ray with your mesothelioma diagnosis?
Well, it sort of turned our life around. We had plans for retirement, and it always seems, you know, this took 48 years. And just as we retired, and we were set, we bought a motor home, we sold our house and bought a park home, and we were just going to clear off to Europe for the winter and come here for the summer. All those plans go. Everything that you planned for, or everything you worked for, just went and left me fighting. And lucky, I've been so lucky with the NHS, and I've been 13 years with no operation, just all drugs. It's really won through.
Well, I'm thankful that you share your story, and I'm also thankful that you participate in clinical trials, because not everyone is a candidate for a trial, but they've learned a lot with your body and the medicine and your blood and all the other things that you've shared. So here's the question. If President Biden was to see your video, what's your message to the United States and President Biden about asbestos?
Please wake up. Please know that you should be banning it by now. You just shouldn't let people suffer like this. You know what? You're paying compensation, so you are aware that it is a very dangerous substance and it is killing so many. And so please ban it.
Thank you, Mavis. I'll make sure that people know that you have an active Facebook group and share some of your other educational materials, and especially your foundation that you've done so much great work on. So heartfelt thanks from my kitchen table to yours. Thank you for kicking off our conference and ensuring it's going to be the best of the best.
Thank you so much, Mavis, sharing all of your expertise with all of us and all the mesothelioma warriors across the country. And I appreciate the shout out, the wake up call to our president. Our next speakers are Sean and Nicole Shields.
Hello, my name is Nicole Shields, and my father was William D. Shields. He passed away from mesothelioma on August 10th, 2004. I don't know of the exact day that my dad was diagnosed, but I know that I was there when he received the news that he had mesothelioma from asbestos from working in the shipyard in Newport News, Virginia, so many years ago. Since the day my father found out, my life has never been the same. My father was an iceberg spotter. He always let us know when things were coming in our way and we needed to make it through to steer clear from. My dad was a legend in the sense that he always loved to have words of wisdom for each of us. At the time when he got diagnosed, it seemed we were all in need of some wisdom and needed a lot of help and support. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, when emotions are high, intelligence is low, but that's exactly how I felt. Doug Larkin was my stepbrother-in-law at the time. He took the wheel and he made it his mission to fight asbestos. He met Linda Reinstein on Capitol Hill, and together they started Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization. My father was excited about ADAO's purpose, but he had passed before it really had a chance to take off. I know he was grateful for his mission and to have a chance to benefit from the early work. It was a challenging time, and I just tried to block it out. The thing about this disease is that it never allows you to fully heal from it, as we are fighting to advance the ban of asbestos in America and the world. I can remember quickly after my dad's diagnosis how positive I wanted to be, and I wanted to be for him, to know that I was always going to be strong for him. I struggled to make the most of the minutes, the days, the times that I had with him. I knew from growing up in the same area my whole life how bad and truly awful mesothelioma is. I knew of so many friends and acquaintances in the area that had passed from it. I knew that it was a quick passing. Once people got diagnosed, they would quickly die, and that in my head was enough to just kill me. This was 2004. I know that they have made some strides and things are getting better, and I like to think to keep positive for everyone. My father was a legend to me, guided me, and he helped me when I didn't even know I needed it. Now, somehow at 29, I was in the driver's seat of how to care for him. There was plenty of help. I just had to navigate through it. In my journey, I have followed, liked, researched all along the way to get here. I've taken meetings with high officials only to be met by their staffers instead. I have been fighting it. It just wasn't as public as some. Being in the beauty industry, for example, I've also learned how much asbestos is still used in everyday products, and it really upsets me. Today is the big day for my brother and I, as today you will hear our voices. This disease took my dad from me, and I promise you, as God is my witness, it will be banned before I die. My hope for this speech is to let you know we all grieve differently. We all have ways we can band together to help. Your timeline may look different than others, and it is always important to just be supportive. May God bless each and every one of you.
Hi, my name's Sean Shields, or as I'm more widely known, Nicole's brother. I too share the sentiment that asbestos has changed our family forever. I'm one who tries to find answers when faced with a problem. Like any good business person will tell you, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. Rather than just trying to rely on physicians, my family took that sentiment to heart. We looked around and tried to find solutions to the overall problem of asbestos. We wanted to take action. As Nicole mentioned, my late brother-in-law, Doug Larkin, and my sister, Kim Cecchini, helped Linda Reinstein form ADAO. I was also hurt, confused, and I wanted to do something to make a difference. And I was happy to have a chance to join with ADAO. As my father used to always say, it's much harder to hold your hand up to stop a moving train than to just get run over. Because I was working with Kim on some graphics work, I was tapped to create the logo for this organization. And like everyone else, I felt I was able to do something in an otherwise powerless situation. I felt that through a simple action, I was able to help propel things forward for the cause of banning asbestos. As a marketer, I know we must continue our actions by liking and sharing on social media to push awareness forward toward the banning of this killer. I believe in the power of community. Part of my belief in ADAO is because we can be stronger together. I would love for everyone in this conference to share their experiences and tag us on social media and help us spread the word. There is power in numbers. I have some simple suggestions for all of you. First, tag ADAO in your posts. Use the hashtag #BanAsbestos to tell your story. Your story matters. Second, encourage your friends and family to go to www.asbestosdiseaseawareness.org to learn more with our educational materials that we have to spread the word. There is nothing more powerful than education. For instance, did you know that if you have a house older than the 1980s, you might have asbestos? Do you have a loved one who has worked in industries that were impacted by asbestos? What does that mean for you? ADAO has these answers. I wish we could go back in time. My dad had no idea that working in the shipyard and in the heating and air industry meant he was exposed to asbestos. Asbestos is everywhere, but so are we. We are literally everywhere. We won't stop. We will hold up our hand when the train comes, and we will stop the spread of asbestos. Thank you.
So session 1 is special to ADAO. We want to give you a little bit of an overview of progress and challenges from the front line, as Celeste had said earlier. You're going to want to hear more from every single element probably that I throw into my PowerPoint here. And the good news is you'll get that today from session 1, 2, 3, and 4. I am Linda Reinstein, the co-founder of the Asbestos Disease Awareness. Let's get started. Are we good? So let's take it from the top, as Fosse would say in dance. 3 facts. Let's write these down, and I'm going to test some of our key industry people on this call later on today. Asbestos is a carcinogen. There is no safe or controlled use, and nearly 70 countries have banned asbestos. There'll be a test at the end of this presentation. So ADAO has been very clear since we started 18 years ago. We've always been on a dual track. We always know that there has to be 2 ways to get this job done. So I believe that the light at the end of that tunnel represents a ban. That's what I hold close, is hope and knowledge. How are we doing our work? Let's think in 4 prongs. Education, regulation, legislation, and litigation. Not for civil justice, although I support that. It's about our legal action against EPA. I'm not going through each element of this timeline with my brief time, but all of this will be available on ADAO's site. I want you to take away that over 100 years ago, we knew that asbestos exposure would cause suffering, disease, and death. Over 100 years ago, what have we done wrong? We know that labor came to the front of the line to try to protect their workers and families. We know that Dr. Salakoff and others in the mid-50s and 60s recognized the biological effects, obviously. We had our record high in 79. It's hard to believe that 803,000 tons of metric tons of asbestos was so-called consumed. What does that mean? It can be in your homes, schools, buildings, cars, elsewhere. EPA tried to ban it in 89. It was overturned in 91. And 2016 is when we finally signed into law, President Obama signed into law, the Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act. We cheered. We thought we were done. No, I'm not reading this. You can breathe easy. I wanted you to reference the fact that over 50 years ago, these are the different steps EPA has taken, as well as CPSC. These are the regulatory actions and observations and actions that they've taken. And where are we today? Well, I can tell you that the chlor-alkali industry in 2011, this is an ADAO internal slide that I made with my autistic intern who loved numbers. We started going back through USGS data, and we wanted to see where was asbestos being consumed. And you can see that the construction industry got it back in the 2007. And who took over? The chlor-alkali industry, and you'll hear more from Dr. Castleman. They have become the largest, or what's called the primary importer and user of raw asbestos for asbestos diaphragms. And there is, yes, safer, affordable technology. So where are we with policy? If I tell you that legislation is one of our prongs, take a look here. 2016, we have had, since 2016, we have had 4 Alan Reinstein banned Asbestos Now Acts. 4. That is 3 too many for me as a mesothelioma widow. We are continuing to fight for change legislatively and with the agency. And this, as you will hear later on today, must end. We have all the science we need. Using our humor and our knowledge, this is one of our latest cartoons. We do these cartoons, and it's Africa cartoons, and John Curtis is a dear colleague, and Themba worked from South Africa. We do cartoons so we can reduce any barrier to language. We want people in Brazil to be able to look at that and see on their books it says lies, spin, and BS. We want them to recognize that the industry infiltrates conferences like ours. We want to hold them all accountable. The playbook has changed. We have the ball. Here's where we are with facts. There's always reporters that come on and they want to know what's new. It's very hard to talk about what's new because, frankly, it's a 100-year-old problem. This is the latest data I pulled last night. You can see in 2021 that the imports equaled 100 metric tons, and they came in from Brazil and China. This year, 2022, from January to July, we have allowed more than 100. We have allowed 141 metric tons. We're on target. We've already beat 2021, and I guarantee you, this will be a year we will hope to forget as far as raw asbestos imports for the chlor-alkali industry. The good news is the EPA issued an economic analysis for their proposed rule, and its risk management. You'll hear much more from Bob Sussman about part 1 and the other elements, part 2. I hope you get a sharp pencil, but we make all this available on our website so it becomes easier. But I want you, the takeaway today is look at this list. We have 3 companies, and there are now only 8 plants. They closed in Niagara Falls. using asbestos diaphragms for the chlor-alkali industry. It's reprehensible. And there is non-asbestos technology. In fact, Bob and I are doing research on a new project. We know, since Senator Merkley held his legislative hearing for RBAN, we know we have the industry documents. We know that they're transitioning. We know they can do it, and we know they can do it about 2 to 3 years. What's the problem? Dr. Castleman won't hold back this afternoon. When Earl and I traveled around Louisiana, it was gut-wrenching. It's gut-wrenching. We have people that live near these communities, and we know from the EPA economic analysis, we know that these fence line communities in a 3-mile radius have an elevated rate of cancer compared to the rest of the population. We have those clips. If you want more, let me know. I'll give you my data from their economic. It's a 200-page report. So here's our cartoon, and it's not funny, but it drives. It's Earl Daughter's photograph in the background. Young girl, daddy, don't they know their chemicals can make us sick and even kill us? Yes, my child, they do. Environmental racism is a very real thing. It is, and we're going to end it. So going back to how we do what we do, yes, education is a huge component to our work. And thanks to our sponsors, our speakers, our leadership, our donors, volunteers, we're able to host congressional staff briefings. In fact, we just did our 8th. And on this slide, you can see 7 of our speakers, some of them presenting today. We develop prevention materials, as Sean said. You can find the latest and greatest. We did investigative studies state by state, so you can see how many people have died in various states. And our research against the chlor-alkali plants and industry continues. And yes, it will be covered by the media. Regulations, where are we? It's tough. Think dual tracks. We applaud the EPA for what they're doing. They have worked so hard. Those career staffers don't give up a second of trying to protect public health. But it's not easy when you have industry fighting you. And sometimes it's both sides of the aisles industry. TSCA was signed into law. In fact, Emily and I had the deep honor of watching President Obama sign that law, the bill into law. And we thought we were on a pathway, a glide path to get this done. We were wrong. And so were many people here in the audience and who will speak today. So yes, we were able to get asbestos prioritized. Bob is going to go into this in detail. Yes, there has been a risk evaluation for asbestos and risk management has been done, and there is a proposed rule. Bob will tell you more. But I want you to see 6 years is what we spent, and we're not close to being done. So, okay, talk to me about legislation. Yes, happy to. We've had, as you saw on the slides, we've had 4 Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Acts, and we've had many ban bills before that as well. But on this slide, it'll show a picture on the left is the International Association of Firefighters, Dr. Wu, Senator Merkley, myself. This was the first legislative hearing. So if you're curious about what we're saying and what industry is saying, I'd be happy to send you a transcript from that hearing. But our bill will ban all 6 fibers. It will ban winchite and richterite if passed. There is a transition plan. We do use the AHERA definition, which is commonly used by other agencies. We don't need to perfect a definition. We need to stop the imports that are coming in. And there's actually, Senator Merkley has added a line item to develop an educational outreach program. So those are all strong things. Litigation. Before Alan got sick, I didn't know anything about litigation in the sense of why to sue, who should sue, how do you do it. And it's not something I easily embraced in the beginning. But I've learned. The lawyers have taught me. Bob Sussman has taught me. You have to have a legislative and a legal strategy, or you can sit there and wait. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm done. I'm going to be 67. My hourglass is spinning to the bottom. Bob's going to tell you more about the 3 cases that we filed and the ones that we won. And in closing, I just want you to know that, yes, the cancer moonshot is here. If President Biden wants to sit down with us, we're happy to have that discussion. We can start preventing cancers today by passing the Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Act and or helping the EPA do their regulatory work. It is time to stop the imports and use. We're done. Thank you for my time.
Thank you so much, Linda. And we have the privilege right now to have a video message from Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon.
Senator Jeff Merkley here, and I want to talk to you today about a grave threat to our public health, asbestos. We know that exposure to asbestos can be absolutely deadly for individuals. And that's why most of the developed world, some 60 nations in total, have banned it, banned its use, banned its importation, but the United States has failed to act. And that's why Representative Bonamici and I have introduced the Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Act. We need to get this bill passed. Now the EPA, they're in a process where they're considering a ban on one type of asbestos fiber instead of all 6. That's not good enough. Now is the moment to end importation. Now is the moment to end commercial use. Now is the time to end American exposure to this deadly fiber. Let's get it done and make 2022 the year we pass the Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Act.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Really important that we get our ban passed. Our next speaker is Dr. Richard Lemon.
Thank you, Celeste. It's an honor to be here, as I have been since 2005. We are all gathered here to discuss asbestos. We are scientists, we're physicians, we're workers, we're family members, we're individual citizens, and we're relatives of asbestos victims. Our friends and family members are still getting sick and dying of asbestos-related disease. Unfortunately, many believe asbestos has been banned in the United States. You're with us today because you know it has not been banned. All of us in ADAO know that this is unfortunately true, and we are working together as an organization to make this change to include America not only in this ban, but the rest of the world. Nearly 70 countries have already taken the step to ban asbestos and stop its use. According to Dr. Chris Murphy of the University of Washington's Global Disease Center, some 40,000 deaths occur in the United States alone each year from asbestos-related diseases. And this number is not decreasing. It is still going up by 200 to 400 deaths each year. Lung cancer by far represents the largest number of diseases and death from asbestos exposure, followed by mesothelioma, laryngeal cancers, ovarian cancers, as well as the non-cancerous lung diseases asbestos produces. According to the International Agency for Research on Cancer, there are also positive associations observed for asbestos-related cancers of the pharynx, stomach, and colorectum. In fact, at the last meeting of the International Agency for Research on Cancer in 2009, the working group voted evenly to include colorectal cancer as a known cancer related to asbestos. Unfortunately, as it was an even vote, it didn't get counted. Asbestosis and non-cancerous lung diseases were first suspected to be associated with asbestos, as Linda showed on her slide, in the early 1900s. And by 1930, the first epidemiological study had shown the association as causal between asbestos and lung cancer. Mesothelioma was first suspected in 1943 and later confirmed in the early 1960s as an asbestos-related disease. It's now called a sentinel disease because it is solely related to asbestos exposure. Those who continue to preach that some forms of asbestos like chrysotile are safe or can be safely are not in touch with the science. Regulation in the past has played an important role in reducing the risks of asbestos-related diseases. However, it was never enough. That is why, over the past 46 years, the quest for replacing or banning asbestos has been pursued. When I first went to work for the Federal Bureau of Occupational Safety and Health, known as Bosch, in 1970, which later became the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and began my research, the current methods for control of asbestos exposure were through substitution of non-toxic materials and numeric measurements for concentrations of limiting worker exposure to asbestos. As research moved forward, it became clear that no amount of regulation would eliminate asbestos-related disease or death, especially the asbestos-related cancers. Niosh came into existence in April of 1971, and with it came the mandate to recommend new health-based standards for occupational safety and health to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, known as OSHA, and the Mine Safety and Health Administration was later added, and EPA was also created in that same time period. The very first recommended standard out of Niosh was for asbestos in 1972. And in that standard, it was recommended 2 fibers per cc as an 8-hour time-weighted average for asbestos. There had been guidance limits recommended as far back as 1938 by the United States Public Health Service, the official agency that I began working for in 1970. The early guidance limit was not a measurement of fibers, however. It was a measure of weight. And that weight, it was called a geometric or a weight measure, total dust standard for dust containing asbestos. Some years later, it was estimated that that recommendation of 5 million particles per cubic foot, which sounds very large, but to the naked eye you can't see that, was later translated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or more fibers per cc. So you can see that was a very large amount of asbestos that we have been letting people in the workplace be exposed to over the years. It was recognized by Niosh that the new recommendation was going to be wholly effective and wholly non-effective for reducing asbestos-related cancers. Or as Niosh stated in their 1972 criteria document, that control of worker exposure to the limits stated will prevent asbestosis and more adequately guard against asbestos-induced neoplasms, and it will be subject to review as necessary. Well, in 1976, Niosh did review it because we found the data that the original 2-fiber for asbestosis was based upon was incorrect. And it was from the British Occupational Hygiene Society. So we revised our recommendation. And what we said was available studies provide conclusive evidence that exposure to asbestos fibers cause cancer and asbestosis in man. Lung cancer, asbestosis have occurred following exposure to chrysotile, crocidolite, amosite, and enthophyllite. Mesotheliomas, lung cancers, and gastrointestinal cancers have been shown to be excessive in occupationally exposed persons, while mesothelioma has developed among individuals living in neighborhoods of asbestos factories or near crocidolite deposits, and also in persons living with asbestos workers. Asbestosis has been identified among persons living near enthophyllite deposits. So you see, we're talking about the 6 fibers that are regulated. Additionally, Niosh stated excessive cancer risks have been demonstrated at all fiber concentrations studied to date. Evaluation of all available human data provides no evidence for a threshold or for a safe level of asbestos exposure, as Linda said earlier. In view of the above, the standard should be set at the lowest level detectable by available analytical techniques and approach consistent with Niosh's most recent recommendations for other carcinogens, such as arsenic and vinyl chloride. Such a standard also should prevent asbestosis. The concentration at that time in 1976 was at 0.1 fiber per cc. But since Niosh determined this would only be adequate for prevention against non-cancerous effects of asbestos, they included the following statement: to materially reduce the risk of asbestos-induced cancer, only a ban can assure protection against carcinogenic effects of asbestos. This is what Niosh said in 1976. This statement brought a new consideration. We're not working now on just a number. We're working on getting rid of asbestos in the workplace. And this is very, very important date. Unfortunately, it never happened. As Linda said, the EPA tried to ban asbestos in 1989, but it was overturned by the courts, and a ban never occurred. So Niosh has continued its research, and its latest edition is something called the Asbestos Road Map, which has made crystal clear that its purpose was to develop a research agenda to sort out health and policy implications of various definitions of asbestos. Niosh's roadmap was to outline a research agenda that will guide the development of specific research programs and projects that will lead to a broader and clearer understanding of the important determinants of toxicity for asbestos fibers and explore toxicity of other related substances. Niosh recognized that the results from such research may impact, as well as occupational health and safety policies, and also recognized that the issue that we are looking at could be important not just in the workplace, but also in communities, and specifically to the general population from legacy asbestos. Unfortunately, some of us do not realize that the Niosh Roadmap is a process. It's a research plan, not a new policy statement. Niosh even states this in the foreword to their roadmap when they say many questions and areas of confusion and scientific uncertainty remain, that the purpose of this roadmap is to outline a research agenda that will guide the development of specific research programs and projects that will lead to a broader and clearer understanding of the important determinants of toxicity. To my knowledge, Niosh has not completed this research project. It's still ongoing. And ADAO has worked diligently on new legislation, not regulation, that would ban asbestos. The same asbestos materials as found in regulation today, as Linda talked to about the 6 asbestos fibers earlier. The language in the Allen Reinstein bill contains that same definition for asbestos. The action we should take immediately to act on validating these risks. And we must remember, as Sir Bradford Hill, a noted biostatistician in Britain, said in 1960, that all scientific work is incomplete, whether it be observational or experimental. All scientific work is liable to be upset or modified by advancing knowledge, but that does not confer upon us a freedom to ignore the knowledge we already have or to postpone that action that it appears to demand at a given time. As new validation and new information does occur, I would like to paraphrase Bradford Hill's comments in today's time frame. The time is now. We must not let the good, what we already have at hand, destroy what we are waiting for the perfect to materialize. So it is time that we pass the Allen Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Act of 2022. And I thank you for your time.
Dr. Lemon, thank you so much for really putting the point that asbestos exposure, asbestos disease is a public health problem. And in public health, we talk about precaution, protecting people. And I think it's so important that we keep that in mind. Our next speaker is Dr. Arthur Frank.
Thank you, Celeste, and it's always an honor to be here with you. It's a privilege that for me goes back many years. I first met Linda in Japan in 2004. Had the privilege of meeting Alan before he passed away as well, and have been invited in to be part of the ADAO family since that time. In the session today on progress and challenges from the front line, the front lines are still there in many places around the world. The biggest challenge here in the United States, as you've been hearing already this morning, is getting a recalcitrant Congress to pass the Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now bill. That is our biggest challenge here, and that would go a long way, not to eliminating disease now, because we'll have disease for 50 years into the future because of the long latency for asbestos disease, but it's a start we have to make. ADAO and its members have had successes around the world. We have here the evidence of NGOs being important. We have Fernanda, our colleague from Brazil, with she and her colleagues there, and members of ADAO helped testify in Brazil. Online, I believe we have my friend Guillermo from Colombia, where again the ban got put in place. We even got the Congress to consider closing their mine. There was some discussion of banning it in Colombia, but keeping the mine open, and that got changed. So the importance of NGOs in those countries and elsewhere in the world, in the UK and the Netherlands and Australia, has been really quite important. Besides the challenge of getting the ban bill passed, I agree with Sean Shields, who said that education is the problem. We have miseducation, we have lack of education, and we actively have companies still putting out false science and scare tactics, as we've seen with the chlor-alkali industry. And we have to fight this with education. I was recently talking about being on the front lines. Less than a month ago, I spent some time over in India, where I've probably made 30 trips now, often related to asbestos. And there's now a grassroots effort at some very senior levels in a country that uses 25% of the world's asbestos to stop using it. And so I was meeting with my Indian colleagues and moving this process along, and they're coming up with a game plan that will take on their government, hopefully, to do this. The problem there, of course, is that many of the asbestos cement plants are owned by members of parliament, so when your own pocketbook is affected, that carries an extra special challenge. I've also spent some time, I was on a phone call yesterday, and I have a meeting with a group of families next week in Israel by Zoom, because they've had a school that had asbestos in it that has now been removed, but because of misunderstanding and miseducation about the problems of asbestos and under what circumstances and how much and where, they are loath to send their children back to a school that's been cleaned of its asbestos, where the local measurements are quite low, lower than what we even require here in the United States, but they still don't necessarily want to send their children back. We know that industry keeps fighting. They're taking on our dear colleague Brad Black at the Card Clinic in a very personal way, and the clinic and its activities. More comments about that a little later. We're also a group of us fighting the infiltration into World Health Organization documents that still tout false concepts. And I've run into these in terms of women don't get the disease, chrysotile doesn't cause the disease, the genetics of different populations is different. So the bottom line is we need to pass our ban bill here, but around the world, we must continue to fight. We will continue to fight. And as I've said at these meetings in the past, what we have on our side is the truth and the honesty of science. And so I know that at some point we will succeed. So thank you for the opportunity of being with you.
Dr. Frank, thank you so much for your expertise and your always very insightful remarks. We now have the privilege of hearing from Bob Sussman, who is joining us by Zoom.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Bob. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Good morning, buddy.
So I'm happy to be here and to follow such great speakers. And I have some slides, and I'm going to look to the folks in Atlanta to advance them. So let's get the first slide up on the screen. ADAO has pursued a multi-pronged strategy to ban asbestos and advance prevention of exposure. And one element of that strategy is litigation, and specifically litigation against EPA to push them hard to maximize their implementation of the Toxic Substances Control Act. And let's go to the next slide and talk about TSCA if we can. And I think as Dick Lemon very logically and forcefully explained, it's one thing to set a standard for asbestos in the workplace, but that doesn't necessarily eliminate exposure. What eliminates exposure is banning asbestos and eliminating the use of asbestos. And that's what the Toxic Substances Control Act is all about. And so for the last 40 plus years, the focus of efforts at the federal level to ban asbestos has been on the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA, as many people call it. You also heard that in 1989, as a result of the concerns raised by Niosh and others in the 70s and the early 80s, EPA banned most uses of asbestos. But that ban was unfortunately overturned in court in 1991, and following the ban, that court decision, we had years of inaction. And what changed the period of inaction is the amendments to the Toxic Substances Control Act that were enacted in 2016. And the failure of EPA to ban asbestos was a true motivating factor in those amendments. Asbestos became the poster child for the need for a stronger federal law. And the law was in fact designed in the hope that EPA would finally be able to ban asbestos. So right after the law was enacted, asbestos was selected as one of the initial priorities for risk evaluation and regulation and risk management under TSCA. And ADAO pushed very hard for EPA to prioritize asbestos, and the agency did. So ADAO's challenge was to do everything we could to promote a rigorous determination of the risks of all asbestos products in use, and then to use TSCA authority for maximum prevention of asbestos exposure. Let's go to the next slide. So after the euphoria of the new law had passed, and we focused on what EPA had to do, it unfortunately became clear that the Trump administration at EPA was recalcitrant They were slow to rise to the challenge of tackling asbestos and did not fully seize the opportunity Congress provided. There were a few critical failings in EPA's approach, the refusal to examine the risks of legacy asbestos, their failure to get reliable and accurate information on ongoing uses of asbestos and the conditions of exposure, the unwillingness to address all 6 recognized asbestos fibers, the unwillingness to examine all known cancer and non-cancer endpoints and effects, and the reluctance to look at asbestos risk holistically across pathways of exposure. So the question for ADAO is, how do we motivate EPA to use all of the tools at its disposal? Go to the next slide. So our strategy was to push EPA on all fronts with litigation as a key backstop. And this involved taking every opportunity to engage with EPA, submitting high quality information, relying on credible recognized asbestos experts, partnering with states, public health organizations, and the scientific community, and finally, litigating where EPA has failed to meet TSCA requirements. So what is our track record? It's, I say this immodestly, it is a very, I think, a very strong track record. We have filed 3 cases against EPA. We won one very, very major victory in court, and we achieved 3 very positive settlements with EPA, which have resulted in tangible EPA action. So let's go to the next slide. I'd like to start with the issue of legacy asbestos, because one of the first challenges we had with EPA is they took the position that legacy asbestos was not within their mandate under the law. And we joined in August of 2017 with a coalition of groups to challenge EPA's interpretation of the law in the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And we won that case. In November of 2019, the court ruled that the exclusion of legacy uses and associated disposals contradicts TSCA's plain language. Why is this important? I don't think I need to remind you of this. The continuing presence of asbestos throughout the built economy is an important ongoing source of exposure and risk for many segments of the population. And we need EPA to take a hard look at it. So let's go to the next slide. What happened as a result of the Ninth Circuit decision? What was the practical outcome of that? In December 2020, EPA finalized its Part 1 risk evaluation for chrysotile asbestos, but that evaluation did not include the use of legacy products and disposal. EPA said that it planned to address legacy exposure, but there were no specifics, no indication of the timing of that evaluation or the scope. So we sued EPA again on May 18, 2021 to require an enforceable schedule for completing the Part 2 evaluation. And a few months after that, in October, following extensive discussions between EPA and the Department of Justice, the court entered a consent decree directing EPA to complete the Part 2 evaluation by December 1, 2024. And so where are we now? EPA has actually taken the first important step in conducting the legacy evaluation by issuing a draft scoping document at the end of 2021 and finalizing it just a few months ago in June of 2022. Let's go to the next slide. The second big challenge was requiring EPA to use the authority that it had under TSCA to impose reporting obligations on industry. And it may be surprising that EPA didn't do it. And as they moved into their TSCA risk evaluation, because they didn't require reporting, they had major gaps in their understanding of how asbestos was being used and what the conditions of exposure were. So we petitioned EPA in 2018 to issue a reporting rule. EPA denied the petition. They said they didn't really need the information. Reporting would not be productive. And so we filed suit against EPA in early 2029 after the petition was denied. And then 13 state attorney generals filed a similar petition and took legal action against EPA as well when the petition was denied. On December 2019, Judge Edward Chen, federal district judge in San Francisco, issued what I think is really a stunning decision slamming EPA's rejection of our petition. And here's what the judge said. Despite the strong enforcement powers at its disposal and the importance of complete and adequate information, the EPA in this instance has declined to collect all reasonably available information concerning the risks posed by asbestos conditions of use. This was a very, very strong rebuke of the agency. So let's go to the next slide to see how Judge Chen's decision played out. The judge's decision, in fact, directed EPA to issue a reporting rule under TSCA addressing its information gathering deficiencies on asbestos. Perhaps not surprisingly, but much to our disappointment, EPA dug in its heels to fight the decision. They filed a motion with the judge to get the judge to change the decision. But I think with the influence of some higher up people at EPA in the early days of the Biden administration, they capitulated, and we were able to enter into a settlement agreement with EPA in which the agency committed to propose reporting on 4 things. First, importation and use of raw asbestos. Secondly, importation and use of asbestos-containing mixtures and articles. Third, processing of raw asbestos in articles and mixtures. And fourth, and quite significantly, the presence of asbestos contaminants in other articles, substances, and mixtures, including talc. So EPA, in fact, proposed its reporting rule in the spring of this year and is poised to take final action by the end of 2022. And I wanted to read a quote from the the proposal, which I find quite remarkable in light of the history of this issue. The proposal said that EPA needs an updated data collection to better understand the universe of asbestos types in commerce and the specific entities presently manufacturing, including importing and processing asbestos, including asbestos-containing products. Well, it was great that they finally saw the light and had an epiphany, but the world would have been much better if they had had that epiphany 5 years earlier. The final issue, if we can go to the next slide, that we will address that we addressed in litigation is fixing the flaws in the Part 1 risk evaluation. And I think I described before some of the deficiencies of the Part 1 evaluation and the ways in which it resulted in an incomplete picture of asbestos risk to public health. We filed the case in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, basically to get EPA to fill all the gaps in the Part 1 evaluation. And again, we reached a very good settlement with EPA in which they committed to expand the Part 2 evaluation to address all 6 asbestos fiber types rather than only chrysotile, to examine all cancer and non-cancer endpoints, to evaluate all conditions of use that were omitted from the Part 1 evaluation, and finally, to evaluate the human health risks of exposure to asbestos in talc and talc-containing products. So together with information obtained from the reporting rule, the expanded scope of Part 2 will provide a comprehensive understanding of the exposure and risk from current and legacy products. Let's go to the final slide here. We could not have done this if we were on our own. We had strong and I think very credible partners and co-litigants who I think gave us stature with the court and also underscored the broad consensus behind the cases that we were filing. And I want to give a big shout out to the organizations and individuals who joined in our cases. I'm just going to read the names here: American Public Health Association, Center for Environmental Health, Environmental Information Association, Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families, Vermont Public Interest Research Group, and then from the scientific arena, Barry Castleman, Dr. Roger Flores, Dr. Frank, Dr. Phil Landrigan, Dr. Lemon, and of course, Celeste Monfortin. So we feel privileged and grateful to have that support, and we would not have accomplished what we did without it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. That was an excellent presentation. I'm turning this back over from the podium to Celeste. We're going to limit the questions. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2. Omit the break and go to session 2 because I see Dr. Markowitz is logging in. Is that okay, Celeste?
Yes, that's fine. And I know we had a few texts, one from Perry Browder. So you want to take that?
Yeah.
You have it on your phone.
I do. So some of the questions, and this is not exactly as written, so I don't want it to be sourced back, but there's always confusion about asbestos-contaminated talc and the jurisdiction of EPA and the FDA. So with this panel, would you like to address how EPA regulates chemicals in industrial products and the duty of FDA, because people get confused about jurisdiction.
Yeah, I can answer that, Linda. Basically, TSCA and EPA regulate the industrial uses of chemicals, the industrial and consumer uses of chemicals, and that includes certainly industrial talc and the products containing industrial talc, and it includes consumer products containing talc as well. FDA has jurisdiction over cosmetics, and there have been talc-containing products that fall within FDA jurisdiction, most notably the baby powder, but also personal care products and other types of cosmetics. So if it's a cosmetic, talc is regulated by FDA. If it's in an industrial or consumer product that is not a cosmetic, it is regulated by EPA.
Thank you, Bob. I have one last question. I know that both Dr. Lemon and Dr. Frank have participated in many congressional briefings on the importance of a ban on asbestos, and I'm wondering, I'm going to ask Dr. Frank this. What kind of questions do you get from congressional staff when you're talking about asbestos? Because I know from my experience with my own students, they think asbestos has been banned.
Oh, that's very much the case. I've told people, if you walk down the streets of the United States and asked 100 people if asbestos was a legal product anymore, 99 of them would probably tell you no. So I don't think congressional staffers are any different. But I think we've now had 17 congressional staff hearings over the years. We have, it goes back to my point about educating them. The questions we get really have to do with how can they inform the people they represent, the representatives to become educated about this. And what we urge them to do is listen to Congresswoman Bonamici and Senator Merkley in terms of their immense knowledge about this. But basically, I don't think we have to educate people any longer that asbestos is a harmful, dangerous, toxic, carcinogenic material. We've got to get them to act. And that's what we're doing.
Thank you so much.